If you wish harm on someone, it probably means you lack an understanding of their position or being. An extended version of this. From the days of being toxic in video games and coming out of it now, well, not now, but a few years ago, and doing action of many types, I thought a lot about the source of all these problems that come with those issues, such as anger and threats and things like that. Things with a negative tone. There's probably flowcharts of these individual things. The thing that I've realised though is it almost always comes down to a lack of understanding. Think of it this way. Who here supports LGBTQIA+ rights? If you don't, then listen closely. If you do, you might learn something from this. Chances are, if you take issue with these types of people, you were brought up believing something that may actually be false. I'm not saying God doesn't exist, but what I will say is that if it relates to the Holy Bible, Christianity, God doesn't actually take issue with LGBTQIA+ people. There is no word from God in the Holy Bible that says it's a sin to act on said thoughts or anything related to LGBTQIA+. But whether that's same-sex relationships or marriage, gender/body dysphoria, those are not sinful fundamentally speaking. On top of this, you might learn something from doing research on it. Using demonstrable evidence, that is. Demonstrable meaning you can demonstrate the evidence again if needed. Like for example, if you throw water on paper to see if it soaks the paper, and it does, then that's demonstrable evidence that the paper is soaking up water. How many on the opposite? Yeah, whatever it is. How many on the opposite end matters too. Given the methods are identical, such as throwing water on the paper again, that is. But somehow the study finds it doesn't soak water. That cannot be demonstrable evidence until it outweighs the opposite result, which has been demonstrated. Actually, this reminds me of how there's a stigma/tyrannical practices used against people who actually can't control who they are. Example of paedophilic disorder or psychopathy. Those likely have some demonstrable evidence saying they are tied to a physical being in a way that means, like other preferences, you probably can't change them. You also likely can't change the states of being, and this means it cannot be a belief. I struggle to read the script. It will likely result in more harm if you approach it violently, since it doesn't address the source of the problems, or even the prevention of its issues. Which is pretty much saying that people who are born with these issues are just born with them. You cannot change that unless you find a solution or a treatment. And the solution of death is immoral. I think that should be obvious by virtue of someone being human. This reminds me also of how social issues occurred for centuries, until humans evolved to grow smarter and the way that things are, once again through demonstrable evidence. These things were done to, in fact, save many people from harm and death. No more slavery. No more, or at least not as much, racism. And here I'll admit something. I'm still kinda young, 25 years old. Something I learnt that has blew my mind is even though things in the past were far simpler and required talent and skills, things nowadays have more reliable methodologies, societally speaking anyway. I think all these new inventions that have come and changed our lives, like the internet and computers, they're amazing. The fear of change simply won't exist when you focus on what matters most there, where again you look at the source. Being as good as possible whilst causing the least harm possible is what matters here. Harm being the thing we almost certainly have to avoid. This is why people believe in things like veganism, health, climate change, etc. These are topics that have to be addressed, and if there's a method of addressing them that is currently working. This is all done to give people a future, not specifically to take things away from you. And something off script here. I remember how I was brought up around a sort of hostile environment. Not too bad, but still. Like my father had constant anger issues and weird beliefs. It still sort of pains me, the punishments he gave me, which I consider physical abuse now, maybe mental abuse. As it reminds me of how sort of things maybe come from a desire from not understanding. I don't know what you call it, desire from not understanding or something like that. You get these sort of violent urges that cause you to do things, and I think that's something that my father probably did. It's kind of complicated, but it's this has been a topic that's bothered me for a while. Just the whole, why would you harm or kill someone sort of thing. Speaking about something else again, there's a post on r/LGBTQ, or whatever the subreddit name is. It's basically highlighting the weird other subreddit thing where it was r/there was an attempt. And for some reason the right wing lost a vote somewhere and decided to piss off the left by making up this artwork which showed well, the idea was that it was supposed to show the left and LGBTQ plus in a bad light, but they failed because it actually looked good, it looked cute. It's like this rainbow ghost thing, and so that utterly failed. But what got me thinking there was like, actually that's more morbid than you might think. Like, I think people will be angry at that because obviously it's done to try to harm someone. I understand that bit as well. But what really made them do that? That's always something that I'm questioning, and also, are they willing to convince others to change, to believe what they believe? Because the problem is that with bigotry and in general the right wing usually has this left wing counter. I don't take a political position. They tend to not be there to convince you, but rather flex what they know or try to change things forcefully. And I think that ends up being something that creates a misunderstanding and ends up actually damaging the reputation of others and actually dehumanises people. That one common bigotry thing I think that was spread around is things like stoning people to death for acting on an urge. I don't think that's going to be effective. Just psychologically speaking, from what I understand of it. People are not scared of death really. What people are actually scared of is especially not being able to help themselves, or as in, like let's say you have an addiction, not being able to get rid of an addiction or something. That's what people are scared of, but also I think it's also not having the ability to give into said addiction, just as an example. But the only way you can really stop those things is by addressing it at the source. I used this example before in my coming out video. If you want to say that gay marriage is wrong, immoral, you have to provide the demonstrable evidence to do that, and you can in fact convince plenty of left-wing people or communists, maybe any political position, if you can provide the evidence for it. If you can say that, hey, there's more people being harmed and dying with this existing, because that's what matters here. It doesn't matter how you feel about it personally or how emotional you are about it. You're not convincing anyone with that. The only way you can convince is with evidence. And the type of evidence matters as well, of course. And that's where I think a lot of the wishing of harm and death in people comes from. And even though it's invisible in the left sphere, I know for a fact people will have these tendencies to just want the worst for people who oppose them. I guess I'm unique in that aspect, but I don't really hold that sort of thing. I do if I'm having a meltdown with autism, because I keep getting those sometimes. But I don't really truly hold a position where I wish death on someone or harm. Weirdly enough, it was because I've actually committed harm to people that I wanted to change. I've actually known the hardships that come with suffering. I still in fact suffer quite a bit with certain things. I have bipolar disorder. And you know, that's the thing about this entire conversation. I want to prevent harm coming to me as well as others, so I'll do what I can to stop that. That's all I've got to say.